Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello girls, and welcome to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's online coach. So today I've got Schae with me. Schae is a strength coach. Now, Schae and I have actually been chatting on and off for, oh my God, I think maybe 2-3 years now, like here and there. And throughout my time of knowing Schae, I have realized that how powerful she is in terms, not just because she's so fucking strong, but her perception around training and the education around she gives her clients about proper weight training. And we're going to be covering a lot of that today. She's also going to be diving a little bit deeper into her personal struggles when she started her journey. And also we're going to debunk some training misconceptions that a lot of people, come across these days. I know it's like 2022 and we're still coming across these stupid things in the industry. So we're literally going to cover this with this whole session around that. And with Schae, as I mentioned, she came with a background from bodybuilding and now she's solely focused on strength and actually has her own gym as well. So she helps a lot of women and men. Do you help men as well? Yeah, awesome. Cool. A vast majority of people getting them strong as fuck, which I freaking love because we're all about empowering people to feel the strongest as possible. So Schae, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me and thank you for such a stellar introduction. That was awesome. As you say, we're going to kind of try cover as much as we can as possible, but definitely my main mission is always to get people into strength training and also, I guess, take away some of those barriers that come with getting people into strength training as well, because there are quite a lot, as you mentioned, still even in 2022, and with all the new research that there is. So that's definitely kind of my main mission online and also in real life as well.
Yeah, I love that. How often would you say you're dabbling into the research?
I definitely try to keep up to date with research, but I definitely feel like reading and interpreting research is actually a skill in of itself. And so I do find things like there are really good resources like Mass, which is run by Eric Helms, for example. They do like a monthly subscription service where they pull together all the new research on, nutrition, training, all of it, and they do it in a really digestible way. So I definitely try to keep up to date, but I also, look to people who know how to actually interpret that research and can, provide it to the general population in a way that is actually digestible. So yeah, a bit of both, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. And is that something that you've been doing since becoming a coach, or were you doing that prior as well, like the research?
Well, I've always had an interest in research and science. Like I went to uni to study science essentially. So I've always been interested in that aspect and interested in research and actually kind of like learning some facts and, I guess always developing from that current research as well. But yeah, I feel like getting into strength training, it's a largely unregulated industry, like you would know that. And so I feel like it is a bit of everyone's job to keep up to date with research so that they're providing their clients with the best service that they can, and also providing them with the narratives that are actually in line with the research that is available for everyone today, essentially. So I do think it is everyone's kind of role to at least source out, like I said, people who can interpret that research and give it to you in a digestible way, that's for sure. So
I love that because, doing your own research is one thing, but then reading research from somewhere else, it's just another thing. And it can be a little bit complicated at times if you don't understand the language that they're perceiving it as. But speaking of research, too often people will come across research in quotations, alongside Google, and they'll search all these wonderful things of how to do or how to perform certain lifts, and it gives you the incorrect way of doing that. Is that something that you're still coming across with your clients or new people that are wanting to do strength training?
I think the main thing that I come across when it comes to strength training, and especially with new people who come into strength training, is the fact that there is so much information on the internet. And also there's so much information that people are really willing to give out day to day in the nutrition and kind of strength training world specifically. Even if they don't have any experience in that industry or in that kind of sector, is I just find that people come in thinking a lot of the time that there is like one way or like one correct way to do something. And often that means that, when they're deadlifting or when they're squatting, they're really, really scared that they're going to do something wrong once and it's going to result in an injury. Whereas the reality of strength training, the injury rate is so low when you compare it with other sports. But it's these kind of narratives that have been shared for a really long time that really don't have a lot of that research backing them, specifically around technique and, our perfect technique. And I say that with quotation marks because there's no such thing as perfect technique. But I do find that is like the most common narrative that people come to me with. But it's also the thing that I feel like is my job to break down the most so they get the most out of their strength training, but they also look long term how to stick within like the strength world and, not be afraid of injuries. Like, injuries in general shouldn't be something we are super afraid of because you could do anything and injure yourself. And I find that some of the language, especially online, that people use is really fear mongering around injuries. So that's definitely the biggest barrier that I try to, help people break down by just assuring them that it's okay, to feel deadlifts in your back to some degree because it is a back exercise, and, to lean over in your squat and your chest doesn't have to be so high all the time and all these things. So yeah, there's definitely quite a lot of barriers in the strength training world and a lot of those narratives. So
yeah, it's crazy to think that, we're still trying to educate our clients regarding all of that. And I love that you mentioned around the deadlifts with the back, and the squats. So often you hear people going, oh, with your squats, you have to keep your chest up. It's just well, not all the time. It just depends on your mobility. It depends on what type of squat you're actually performing. And I love you mentioned around the injuries side of things because, yes, there's such a fear mongering around that. Till today, my parents, I love them to bits, but they still think that strength training is going to break me. It's not ideal for me to strength training. And, that generation, I don't know, but, your parents or other family members, that some people just don't understand it. I don't know if it's a closed mind situation. But yeah, it's an interesting one when you're trying to let people know that, hey, this is part of life. You are going to get injured either way, whether it's through strength training, which is very minimal compared to you tripping over on the street and, banging your toe.
Yeah, there's obviously risk in anything you do. And I think that for a really long time, the idea that strength training is inherently more dangerous than another sport or another activity has been what has been, explained, especially online. I do find that a lot of coaches, and unfortunately, it's the stuff that gets the most traction is, if you do X, you're going to injure yourself, or if you do Y, you're going to injure yourself. And that's so black and white. And also there is just nothing to, back that up research wise, that if someone deadlifts in flexion, that they're absolutely going to injure themselves, where it's more down to a wide range of variables that could impact someone being injured, even if they're deadlifting in, a range of flexion, which we all do anyways.
Yeah, exactly. There's various ranges of flexion. And now with the new research coming around, well, it's been around for a while, but lately they're saying that that range of flexion is actually good to be deadlifting because it helps you, not so much by, the old school mentality where you have to keep that chest up and the shoulder blades rolled up all the time. It doesn't work for everyone depending on your biomechanics. So yeah.
And that's the thing is like, someone setting their chest could really work for one person, but another person, deadlifting with some degree of flexion or quite a lot of flexion is the thing that works for them. And they've probably trained in that position for a really long time. And you could actually argue in that situation that changing them to come out of that flexion and, get their chest up and to have a perfectly straight back, whatever that is, and however you want to define that, you could actually argue that that would increase their chance of injury as opposed to just staying in flexion, which is potentially where they've been training anyways. But that's kind of what, again, like I try to encourage with my clients is to think a little bit more critically about these really broad and really black and white statements, especially the ones that are online. And again, the ones that do get quite a lot of traction, because that's like the sexy stuff, right? Is like people want to know. And again, I can really empathize with this because when I got into strength training, I was also looking for, that one key thing that would then change my squat, and I'd add 10 kilos to my squat. And it's often explained and marketed like that, although it has no backing.
Yeah, so powerful. And I love that you mentioned that because people really need to go out of their way and question everything. Even if you think it's right, you still need to do a little bit more research and question it. Is it actually right, or is it going to be right for the individual? Because again, we're all completely different. So yeah, it's so cool. Now, you mentioned when you got into strength training. Let's run around that. Like, when did you start strength training?
I started strength training. I'm trying to think of the exact year. So I did bodybuilding in 2015. I think I did like season B or whatever that is. So kind of in the back end half of the year, and I did 2 bodybuilding competitions, but I had been training. I had been doing some degree of weights for a couple of years before that as well. I originally got into the gym and started running, and then I got into, some strength kind of training. I wasn't doing a lot of squatting and deadlifting at the time though, just more general weights. And then I got into bodybuilding and actually competed, and that was in 2015. And then I very, very quickly just like realized that bodybuilding wasn't the sport for me. And I pivoted to powerlifting really quite quickly. I did finished kind of that bodybuilding comp. And then I think it was like 8 weeks later or something like that, I actually did my first powerlifting competition. And the reason why I got into it is I came out of bodybuilding and I just really needed something to take my mind off how my body looked after, it being a really big focus for the past couple of years. And especially, I'd had body image issues, and I'd struggled with and just trigger warning, eating disorders. I had struggled with an eating disorder since from really young age. And I had kind of thought that I had healed from that, and bodybuilding really just brought all those things back to surface. So I finished it and quickly needed something that helped me, I guess, just start on that road to recovery again after, I guess, coming to terms with the fact that I had relapsed. And I went into powerlifting really quickly and fell in love with it and haven't left since. So it obviously looks very different for me now in terms of how I approach training and what it actually means for me. But yeah, it felt like an easy decision to pick up strength training. And yeah, I absolutely love it, and absolutely love teaching other people how to do it too. So
it's so empowering to hear that now. For those who are into bodybuilding, keep doing you do. But those who, have done it and then severely have had, disordered eating around that and the body image issues, I can totally relate to that from a background of being in fitness modeling. And then when I started moving along towards more strength work, you notice there's a big shift that you're finally realizing that it's not necessarily just about your body. You're not training to look a certain way. This time it's more about a certain feeling, like feeling more empowered, feeling healthier within your body. And I don't know about you, Shay, but like when I started transitioning that way, it was really hard for me to transition from not focusing on my body to really focusing on just performance based, because your body changed as I was progressed, and yours has as well. Like it's been an awesome transformation, like seeing you from where you are to where you are right now. And I love the fact that you're so open about it. I think not long ago you also did a post of yourself expressing that you were in a bikini and you felt really comfortable wearing that for the first time in quite a while.
Yeah, I think when I first got into powerlifting, and this is kind of what I was talking about how differently it looks now, is obviously I didn't get into powerlifting and things didn't shift straight away with my body. And I was still, especially online, like talking about my body a lot. And now I feel like I've progressed to a position where my body just is my body and it isn't a conversation anymore. And so I kind of have gotten to the point, especially online, although I built like a bit of my following around, around that body image, I've kind of stepped away from it because I've actually felt that like continuously bringing up my body and talking about my body I actually almost felt like a bit uncomfortable about doing that, because I was making it a point of conversation when it's not a point of conversation in my life anymore. And of course, that's definitely something that has progressed over time. And I'm still trying to figure out, I guess, how I want to communicate that online and also still address some things that I think are really important to talk about and important conversations to start and important conversations to have, but do that in a way that kind of respects where I'm at now and doesn't kind of continuously like bring up the past. And like, interestingly enough, like I've always said that if you have ever had any history with an eating disorder or body image issues that have felt quite severe, it's just management. It feels like for the rest of your life. And I'm never going to say that I'm 100% recovered from it, because there might be a situation. Of course, I've built my world almost now around it not being a conversation, but it's not to say that I won't be in a situation that, for example, and I found this quite a lot, is like I just got married in December, and I found that trying to find a wedding dress specifically really forced me to almost, I guess, come to terms with my healing and how far I've come. And even though I feel like I've come a really long ways, like I'm going to be thrown into situations where the industry, for example, like the wedding industry to some degree, still really thrives on those diet culture beliefs. And I found it really like uncomfortable a lot of the time to actually be in that situation. So it's definitely changed a lot over the past, 6 years of starting strength training. It definitely hasn't been like linear. But yeah, it's just changed so much since I first got into strength training. And I'm sure a lot of people will be able to relate, either being in that first position of, needing a break from focusing on my body, to then also having some healing and not wanting to talk about your body so much. And yeah, it's just been really interesting to, I guess, have somewhat of like spectate that as well, because I do talk about it online quite frequently. So
yeah, I love that you mentioned about the wedding. By the way, congrats. I'm pretty sure I already said that when you did get married, but I really love that you mentioned about the wedding side of things, because yeah, I've had a few clients last year or the year before that were getting ready for their weddings, and they're like, all right, let's get shredded and diet for it. And I'm just like, you're already in good shape. Like, why are we wanting to change what you're looking right now? Like, oh, I need to fit into this dress. And I'm like, make the dress fit you. Like, why do you have to fit the dress? And I think that's a really important message for all women out there, that you don't necessarily have to go down that rabbit hole needing to smaller yourself because you're getting married, or even if it's like some form of other occasion, or it's just crazy to think that we end up going back to those old habits, going, oh, I need to like diet down. Like even summer, summer's here, and like you get all these advertisements, 6-week shred, let's get like, skinny and toned, and it's just like, fuck, like I thought we were over this shit, like let's.
I think like in certain situations like that, it almost feels like the easier decision to do that sometimes, because the alternative is really uncomfortable, and the alternative actually can feel like quite lonely, in the sense like I'm reading a book at the moment, and it's from a page called Beauty Redefined, and it's called More Than a Body. And they had this really like beautiful analogy in the sense of, we start our lives and we're like standing on the shore, and we don't really know all these like diet culture beliefs, and we start to pick up them, and we start to kind of like wade into the water. And then before we know it, we're kind of actually in the water, whether that's shallow water or deep water. And the chances are that, you know, our family and friends are also with us, and they're also standing with us. And that is the situation for a lot of females, is we pick up these diet culture beliefs, and we pick up these body image perceptions that we think we need, and ideals that we think we need to fit into. And before we know it, like, we're in the water, and, you know, we're waist deep, or, you know, neck deep in the water, and we're not quite sure how to get back to the shore. And then when we start taking steps back there too, it can be really hard to make the decision to keep walking back to the shore, as opposed to wading back into that water where we have been for a really long time subconsciously. And that's what I mean by, like, it feels almost easier sometimes to pick those decisions that pull you back in. And I found that happened a lot when I was, you know, trying to find a dress and dealing with the wedding industry a lot, is the comments. And I know this kind of tangent speaking about weddings now, but is having those situations where people were asking me, are you going to diet? Or, you know, okay, well, here's your dress. What size do you think you're going to be though on the actual day? Or, you know, what size do you usually fit into? Like, you know, what are you going to aim to weigh at the wedding? And these were things that I wasn't thinking about. Like, my body is my body, and I just wanted a dress that fit me and made me feel like me. And it felt like every time I went to go try on a dress, or showed people my dresses, there were a lot of these questions that I felt like were trying to pull me off the shore again.
That's such a powerful analogy. And I think it's not just related to fat loss and, you know, wanting to do those certain things, but other stuff in life as well. Like, it could be like work related. You know, if you're getting comfortable with something, or you're getting triggered by something, you'll want the easy way out, and you'll go do what you're used to doing. So yeah, that is so powerful. And I hope our listeners are like nodding their head right now going, yeah, that's me. So in terms of, you know, those uncomfortable moments that you know, were at that shore at the time when you were having those questions, how did you overcome that?
I think for me now, it like feels like my default, in terms of, you know, is this actually a line? Like, you know, I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to diet for the rest of my life. And I also want to, I don't know if this video is going somewhere, but I do have as well, like, I want to absolutely put it out to the world that, like, you know, my body is socially acceptable at this weight. And so obviously the pressure to diet is less, as opposed to if I were in a larger body that isn't so socially acceptable in many different realms. So I feel like at the moment, like, it's kind of like my default to not think about those things so much, but I also want to acknowledge that I know that's not the case for a lot of people. And, you know, it can be really hard. And I don't think there's absolutely no judgment in terms of, you know, taking one step towards the shore and then taking 3 back, and then 2, and then however many it takes, because it can be a really hard thing to come to terms with, and a really hard thing to unravel in your mind, because the chances of you picking up these things, like I said, on a very, very deep subconscious level when you're growing up, are so high. And it's absolutely no one's fault that we pick those things up. But definitely I try to help my clients and help the people I come into contact with at least start to recognize those thoughts as sometimes as not as their own thoughts, as opposed to things that they've picked up over time and have kind of like molded their life.
Yeah, that's so true, because we don't naturally think of these things. We naturally attract that by the external environment that we're around. And as you mentioned, like subconsciously, it's just there because we see it all the time. Because if we didn't see it, we wouldn't even think about it. You know, like right now, you're not associating yourself with bodybuilding anymore. You don't associate yourself with the body image world. You're content with where you're at right now, and you're focusing on the things that are actually going to help you thrive like longer, which is more like this, the training side of things, education, you know, the gym that you're running. So I love that. And you know what? It takes action by, well, no, not action, but it takes a lot for a person to just realize consciously where they're at to make those changes. And like Schae said, you know, change takes time and it's not a linear progression, but over time it gets so much better and you get more confident about the decisions that you make over time.
Yeah. And like, I definitely went in making my decisions in terms of, no, I'm picking a dress that is like my size today, that I could zip up at any point. And I do want to also note that like, it can be like really frustrating when you're trying to heal from these things and there are outside and external influences that feel as if they're almost trying to pull you back a little bit. And in those moments, I think it's just worth like reminding yourself that, you know, at some point we'll like, you know, we were all in the water together. And so you can't be frustrated. Well, you can be frustrated. Of course, your feelings are valid, but you can't hold, you know, that resentment towards someone who, you know, really holds on tightly to those beliefs and potentially doesn't understand the impact that those diet culture beliefs have had in their own life and also how they're choosing to communicate with others as well. Because like I said, it's very on a very deep subconscious level that we need to start pulling apart these beliefs and these narratives. And some people might never get there, and that's totally okay. And in situations like this, I think you just kind of have to honor that everyone is at a very different part in their journey, and it might not be super in line with your own, and to almost like not interpret those questions or those statements as your own beliefs, and almost as if they're not their own beliefs as well. These are stemming from, like I said, lots of diet culture beliefs. And so it's almost separating it. It's like that diet culture is like that separate person that has had such an influence on this other person. And so they're probably in that situation starting to recognize some of those things as well.
Yeah, such a good point. I love that you mentioned that. And that's something that we need to remind ourselves not to resent others for their beliefs as well, because we all have different beliefs and yeah, that's how the world works. But as long as you're noticing your certain thoughts and feelings around that, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. Let's switch back onto the training side of things. Like we were talking about how you started from bodybuilding and went into that rant of body image. But in terms of strength training right now, what's that looking like for you?
Like in terms of like my own lifting or in terms of coaching?
Both. Let's talk about both.
So I guess lifting looks different again to like a couple of years because I'm just typically a bit busier now. So, and obviously COVID's been going on, so I haven't been able to compete for a couple of years, but I'm aiming to get back onto the platform this year. But my training really represents where I'm at in my life. And that means like where I'm at with the gym and where I'm at with like Women's Strength Collective as well. My training just fits into my life now. So I only train 3 days a week. And I'm working with a coach over in America, which is awesome. Another really strong female that I would absolutely recommend checking out. Her name's Claire from Barbell Medicine. But yeah, so my own lifting has definitely taken a backseat, but not in a bad way. And then with the gym, we're just kind of doing our own thing. It just seems to keep growing and growing. And we're just really aiming to just keep helping people from the Canberra region, more specifically, find strength training, feel empowered in strength training, and I guess like just learn to thrive in with taking strength training throughout their life.
I love that. That's so good. You also mentioned something about the Strength Collective. What's happening with that?
Yeah, so I started the Women's Strength Collective in 2019, and the idea behind it was to provide females in strength training or females wanting to get into strength training with a platform and a company that quality information without the common, bullshit that often comes with women in strength training. Because there are quite a lot of those barriers that women do have to overcome to even get to a barbell. And so we ran our first event in 2020 and it was absolutely incredible. It'll probably be, I'll probably run another event pending what the next few months looks like, because it was an absolute pain in the ass to plan an event in COVID. I will probably aim to hold another one this year, and we've just launched our youth program as well, which will be starting next month actually, which is super exciting, and just wanting to really get to that young age, starting to introduce strength training and also start to address some of those body image and diet culture beliefs that they're bound to pick up throughout their life.
I love that, because you don't see many, well, I don't know any other coaches or gyms out there that have been starting doing a youth program. And I think this is going to be a massive game changer.
Yeah, we're really excited, and we've just designed it in a way that makes training and lifting more accessible and I guess more common as well, because we often, and same with me, I didn't pick up strength training properly until, late teens, and I would have loved to known about it earlier and what it could have done for my mindset, to have picked it up at a younger age. So that's what we're really trying to aim to do, to teach young women to have the confidence to strength train and to continuously strength train for the rest of their lives.
Yes, I love that. That's so cool. What's that going to look like? Are you going to be doing that through the gym, or is that like an online content?
Yeah, so it'll be in-person sessions, and it'll run with the school term. So we're running it in terms 1 and 3 here. It'll be a 2-hour session pretty much like every second Sunday. And we have some, specialists who will come in and talk about certain topics that we're not really in scope to talk about. So yeah, we've collaborated with some really incredible people, and just looking forward to getting it up and running for this year. And then hopefully, just keep building on it and making it something that I hope that schools would be really interested in picking up and providing to some of their students, especially to, I guess, the ones that they would deem most at risk, to kind of head down that path that, I started at 12, so such a young age, but it's really common that that's the age that these things start to develop, and that, they're things that can stay with someone for the rest of their lives. So if we can start to provide a different narrative, even if they don't choose that narrative, at least there is another option sitting there. Like I said, it is a hard option to take, but at least there is another option there, as opposed to, them stumbling across it years later by absolute chance, because that's how I found strength training. So just wanting to provide that and have a bit more of like an early intervention mindset about it.
So cool. I love that. You know what? I think it's going to be positively changing a lot of women's minds, especially from a young age. Like, I wish there was something like that when I first started, or even before, like, at schools, like they usually do your typical sports. There's no talk around strength training. It's mainly like, it's still like netball, football, I don't know, tennis. I don't even know. But yeah, just changing that narrative and actually educating them around the strength training, it's going to help them immensely. Yeah, it's going to be huge.
Yes, very excited.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. That's awesome. In terms of the training side of things, I know we started a little bit about debunking some of the myths that we spoke about. We mentioned before, like a little bit about the squats and a little bit about the deadlifts. What are some other misconceptions that you've come across?
So I think speaking to like women specifically as well, I guess that's like the area that I'm most interested in. So that's where I typically have a lot of, I guess I try to get a lot of my info for, and try to provide a lot of my content around that as well. But specifically for women, I would say that they need to be like training any differently to men. If someone has a goal, the two people are you know, a guy and a girl have a goal that is exactly the same, their training can also look nearly identical. There obviously be some individual differences, but that's an individual level, not a gender level. So I think that's a really common thing that I come across, is that, you know, women need to be doing X, Y, and Z compared to men who need to be doing this per day, you know, having this much amount of protein, and they need to be doing this amount of volume. And it's really not any differently. If you took two of my programs and compared them, like I said, there would be an individual difference in terms of where they're at in their training and, you know, if they're heading into a meet. But there isn't a huge difference gender wise, and I absolutely hate that narrative online. It bothers me so much. They always like say it in a way that's like, it's always in pink, and it's always like, you know, women need to be doing, you know, cardio after, you know, their weights to get the most out of, you know, out of their training. And it's so annoying. And I've kind of gotten to the point where like I'll actually like comment on things now, like saying that you're providing an extra barrier for women to get into strength training, because now they think they need to be doing some really specific programming that is only, you know, given out by these 5 health professionals. So that's one that really bothers me. Obviously the bench arch I've spoken about quite a lot online. I posted a video on TikTok not too long ago, and like there were so many comments about the bench arch and how harmful it is. And whilst I don't think everyone needs to be arching in the bench, especially if you're not sports specific, in terms of if you don't want to do powerlifting or have an interest in, you know, strength training super specifically, then you probably don't need to be arching. But for me as an individual, who's someone who is quite competitive in the powerlifting world, I am going to absolutely be pushing my bench arch to decrease my range of motion as much as possible.
That's the goal.
That is the absolute goal. That's correct. And so there's a lot of misconceptions online that arching your back is any more harmful for you than having a flat back, or that you're going to injure yourself long term. Whereas, you know, I'm heading into my 7th year of powerlifting. I've always had an arch to a certain degree, and I've never had any issues from like any back issues from arching. Not that you could figure that out anyways, because there's too many variables. And probably the last one that really annoys me is that we need to be like adapting things all the time to our menstrual cycle. Again, on an individual level, I think that people can adapt things. Like, for example, on day 1 of my period, my back is always absolutely kills me. So I choose not to squat, or actually usually choose not to train nearly at all on that day, unless I truly have to, if I'm going away or something like that. But again, the narrative that we need to be adapting, or we need to be deloading, you know, specifically in a certain week to get the most out of our training, it's just not true. And whilst I work with my clients, and if, for example, some of my clients have endometriosis and they say, you know, we do adapt their training to the times that they're scheduled to have their periods, but not everyone needs to be doing that. And again, creating that narrative only encourages women to have more barriers, as opposed to reducing the barriers to get them to the barbell in the first place.
Yeah, so true. I love that you mentioned those points. And by the way, before we go into adapting to your cycle, TikTok is brutal, man.
So brutal.
Brutal. Oh my God. Some of the comments people leave, you're just like, whoa, like how do you even live right now? Like, it's crazy. But you know what? Like, again, they have their belief. You do you. But again, you know exactly that you're not injuring yourself from arching your back or doing certain movements, because, you know, 7 years on, you're still fine. You're still lifting heavy freaking weights. So it's crazy. And I love that you mentioned around the cycle and adapting to to training, because again, like, people push this like one method that works for all, and it's just like, well, it actually doesn't work that way. Like you mentioned, you know, your first day of your menstruation, your back is absolutely killing you. So of course you're not going to go do a heavy session. You're going to either do upper body or push a different type of weight. And that's different for everyone. Like, you know, some girls thrive when they're on their periods and some women don't. So again, it's looking at the variables around that individual, not following one system that you think is going to work for you.
Yeah, it's like about empowering someone to make their own decisions and what is best for them, as opposed to saying, you know, you cannot lift heavy on this day one, or even, you know, you should lift heavy on that day one. Like, there aren't any hard and fast rules. And again, unfortunately, this is just the stuff that gets the most traction on a platform like Instagram. Is, I don't know, we're just drawn to, you know, that one helpful tip that is going to change everything, and it's just not so simple.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not that simple. And that's why when I mentioned before we were talking about this, you want to be questioning everything. Like, even if you have a coach and your coach is like, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z, ask them. Be like, why are we doing this? And I think that's the best way of learning. Like, I always question my coach, not from like an ego perspective, but for me actually wanting to know the reasons behind that. And I think that's a really powerful way for a lot of women to get educated around that.
Yeah. I think if something just honestly sounds like a little bit too good to be true, or a little bit too like quick fix, then I think that we should really start to like think critically about the statement, and think critically about, you know, the actual opposite of that statement as well. Because like I said, anything that is like super black and white, especially when it comes to strength training, I guess same with nutrition as well, is often doesn't often have a lot of that backing, and it doesn't have a lot of that research behind it. And so the non-sexy way is thinking, you know, is the it depends, and, you know, it matters on an individual level, and we'll do what's right for you. And unfortunately, some of those statements just aren't what people want to hear or are attracted to.
Yeah, but it's not always what you want to hear, it's what you need to hear.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, and that people are slowly realizing that as well, that it's not just about everything that you want, it's what you actually need. So yeah, crazy times. Well, hopefully in the years coming that the narrative will start changing. Fingers crossed that we don't have to have this conversation again in like 5 years of, you know, debunking all these misconceptions still. But yeah.
I definitely feel like it's a lot better.
Yeah.
Especially when I first got into strength training. I do think people are coming around more to the idea that it does depend on an individual level, for sure. And there are really great companies out there that are doing incredible work to start breaking down some of these barriers. So I think we're only going to see more and more of them. Like, I do think really positively about where strength training and like the strength training world is going. Of course, there are always going to be the people that hold on to prior and past beliefs, but they're also not the people that we should be looking forward like to content. Essentially, we should be looking forward to someone who will be able to change their mind and who is flexible in their thinking. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. So I'm super excited, honestly, for the future of strength training, and especially for female coaches as well. I think they're really starting to like come to the table and are being appreciated at the table as well. Still a long way to go, but at least we're starting to see that a lot more, and a lot more people seeking out female coaches. So I'm loving kind of where we're heading, and I hope it stays on this trajectory.
We're taking over the world.
Absolutely.
We are. It's not the 1900s anymore. It's, you know, 21st century. We are ruling the world. I freaking love that. So good. Schae, thank you so much for joining me. Before we jump off, where can our listeners find you? What platforms are you on?
I guess I'm most active on Instagram. So my name is not super common. It's SCHAE. So if you just type that in, you'll be able to find me. And I guess whilst I'm here as well, I just want to kind of shout out some of those other female coaches that I think are really important in industry. So I've already mentioned my coach Claire at Barbell Medicine. There's also Little Liz Fitness, who is she's into more of like the running and the fitness, running and the lifting. So I think she's also a really great follow. So they're definitely two that I would highly recommend, who are putting out really great information, who are definitely worth the follow. So yeah, that's kind of where you can find me and them.
I love that. So good. All right, girls. Well, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you recommend it, share it with your friends, family, your dogs, your neighbors, whoever. And yeah, don't hold yourself back from going into strength training. Start, moving forward into what you're wanting to do in terms of your own mission to become your strongest self, and question everything. Yeah. Till next time, girls, take care and stay strong.